Hello, everyone. It is I, the Fable of Fables, your new best friend. I'm reacting to even more Elder Scrolls nonsense. I've talked about it multiple times, and as many of you who have actually ever looked into the Elder Scrolls lore know that it's very convoluted and sometimes not at all connected properly because multiple writers, too many cooks, all that nonsense. I really do hope they have a lore master to keep things in check. But anyway, I generally enjoy learning about the Elder Scrolls world. As a world builder myself, I kind of like it. I get ideas. It's interesting, and yeah, I like this series. I know not many of you do, and that's completely fine. But I feel like I'm in the mood for some Elder Scrolls knowledge, so please join me. I'd
There you
appreciate it.
go. Unfortunately, last Tuesday's video still hasn't been completed, but in order to not contract a too long delay, I moved that video to coming Tuesday. That said, today we have a bit of a short video on one of Tamriel's extinct races, the Lilmothiit. I got multiple questions on this race on my last two lore AMA streams, so I decided to make a full video on them in order to get all the lore on them in one place. With that said, let's talk about the Lilmothiit.
Yes, please, let's talk about the Fox peoples. I love the Elder Scrolls lore stuff. It's so interesting, but also very convoluted, and it pisses me off.
For a
But
long
God, do
time,
I
there
love it.
wasn't much that we knew about the Lilmothiit. Back in year 1 of the channel, I dedicated a short segment to them, but that information has become a little outdated by now, as with the coming of the Elder Scrolls Online Murkmire expansion, we have a little more lore on this elusive extinct race.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, let's start with the basics that we already knew since the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. The Lilmothiit were a fox-like beast race that lived in the southern part of Black Marsh during the large parts of the Meretic era and the First Era. Most people assume that they were likely somehow related to the Khajiit, as both are mammal beast races and live on the south of Tamriel. We know that when their race was still active on Tamriel, they lived in a largely tribal society, with small towns and villages dotting their society. It's also said that a large part of their society was still nomadic, traveling between their different settlements.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we know too little about them to make any solid speculation on their ancestry. While, for example, we have grounds to speculate that the Khajiit share a common Elnove ancestor with the Elvish races because they can, in some rare instances, create offspring in a union with elves, we have no such examples of the Lilmothiit and no documented unions with humans or elves, meaning we cannot speculate on their ancestry. But due to it being heavily implied that they are somehow related to the Khajiit, my personal speculation would be that the Lilmothiit and the Khajiit likely share an ancestor that evolved somewhere between the Elnove, as a sort of in-between race between the common ancestor with the elves and their current outcome. A bit like how with the elves we have the Aldmer as a sort of in-between race between the Elnove and the modern-day High Elves, Dunmer, Aelites, etc., there was most likely also such an in-between race between the common ancestor with the elves and their modern-day races, or at least when the Lilmothiit were still active on Tamriel. In terms of the gods they worshipped or their pantheon, we have exactly 0 pieces of information, but it's likely to speculate that their pantheon might have been similar to that of the Kothringi, the now also extinct human race of Blackmarsh, with perhaps some
Interesting.
influence by the Khajiit pantheon as both share a common ancestor. I've seen a lot of other people speculate that they might have also had some influence on their culture by the Akaviri races, as the city of Lilmoth, where Lilmoth were speculated to live, some say was used as a prison by the Akaviri, meaning that they might have had some form of interaction with each other back in the day. I keep reading this online on basically every forum and everywhere, but for some reason I've not been able to find any source for it, so take that with a grain of salt. But some people are extremely convinced of it, and I'm yet to find a source for it, so take it with a grain of salt. Another interesting tidbit to note here is that the name Lilmothiit is not the name they gave to themselves,
Oh,
most likely,
really?
because the name Lilmothiit is derived from the Khajiiti language and means literally one who is from Lilmoth.
Meh.
This implies that the Lilmothiit were indeed from the south of Blackmarsh and primarily lived in the area around Lilmoth. We also know that their tribes founded the city of Blackrose, north of Lilmoth, meaning that the area they lived in likely looked something like this on the map. We also know that long before their extinction, they got joined in their towns by the Argonians, or the Sax Lil, and that their culture, the culture of the Argonians, became much more prevalent in the towns of the Lilmothiit than the Lilmolith's own culture, meaning that before their racial extinction, they were already becoming smaller and a less significant part of Black Marsh's society.
Oh, Jesus.
This, in combination with their largely nomadic population, explains why there's so little left of their society as a whole for us to find in, for example, ESO's Murkmire expansion. That said, ESO is planning to introduce historical artifacts in their game for us lore dorks to find, so perhaps we'll be able to find artifacts like a Lilmothiit spear or something like that. If that happens, I'm probably gonna be a 24/7 historian in ESO, as I have to say, that sounds pretty interesting, the artifacts part.
Aww,
Now,
that's adorable.
what brought them to ultimate extinction? Most likely a combination of factors, as some relatively new lore reveals that their society was already diminishing and in decline in the early Second Era, with the Argonians taking an ever bigger prevalence over them, and that most Lilmothiit were withdrawing from their cities on the coast towards the cities of Blackrose, or going back to nomadic lifestyle in the center of Black Marsh. But what ultimately drove their society to extinction was the Canathan flu, a deadly disease that started in Black.
Yeah, there was literally a disease in Black Marsh that killed off many of the non-Argonians, because Argonians are immune to diseases, and it's just like, did the Hist do this? Did the history do this?
Marsh in the year 560 of the Second Era, and I did a recent video on it, card popping up in the corner if you haven't seen it. While this disease hit all of Tamriel, Black Marsh was definitely hit the worst, and it drove both the Lilmothiit and the human Kotringi race that both lived in Black Marsh to complete extinction, as the disease hit all the races except for the Argonians.
Yep.
This ultimately allowed the Argonians to finally take back all of Black Marsh. That said, this is basically everything that we know on the Lilmothiit. It's not much, and I had to scrape every little bit of lore together to make this into a coherent video, as there's surprisingly little lore on them, but significantly more than people usually think. You just need to examine what sources we have thoroughly and connect the right dots, so to say. And that sounded a bit scummy, sorry. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope you consider sticking around until the next video, coming Tuesday. Before I end this video, allow me to thank my top patrons, Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Mr. Christmas, and Mr. Para. These guys, along with all the others on screen, make my current video schedule possible, and I'm very grateful for it. That said, I will see you Tuesday in the next Elder Scrolls lore video, or maybe in a stream this weekend. Bye-bye.
Cat meow. Alright, guys, if you like this kind of content, do like, comment, subscribe. Do let me know. I'm probably going to still react to even more Elder Scrolls content. Bye!